The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on work orders in Design Manager. My name is Brad, and I'll be hosting the demonstration today. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to enter them into the questions pane on your GoToWebinar panel. If the question is outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email them to support@designmanager.com. And lastly, if you miss a portion of the webinar or want to review any of our past discussions, go to our YouTube channel at Design Manager Inc., Design Manager INC. And here you can see a complete listing of all sorts of topics, including our quick start videos, short helpful tutorials, and all of our comprehensive webinars, which we categorize into our project management courses, accounting courses, and all of our weekly webinars as well. Now, today we'll be discussing creating and revising work orders in Design Manager. Two topics we will not be covering are creating purchase orders themselves nor tracking orders, which are discussed at length in our Project Management Course 2, Purchase Orders. In fact, we just re-recorded that one recently. And Project Management Course 4, Order Tracking. Further, the purchase order discussion goes into deeper depth on some of the shared functionality between the purchase orders and work orders. So be sure to review that one, as there will be a little of a deeper dive on some topics that I'll go into leave out in this discussion today. Okay, now, work orders are used to communicate the desired services for fabrication, reupholstery, etc. from a workroom. Much like a proposal or a purchase order, work orders have no true fiscal bearing. Essentially, they can be considered a request for services from the workroom and really nothing more. It is only when a vendor deposit or the inevitable vendor invoice is recorded against the work order does any actual accounting activity take place. Also similar to the proposal, work orders are dynamic. This means that they are intended to be edited as needed to reflect any changes in the order with the workroom. Now, as Design Manager is a fully integrated platform, information from different areas is coordinated for particular functions, and work orders are no different. So let's examine some of the associated areas for work orders, beginning with vendors. So we can go to our project tab, our lists and glossaries, click on our vendors button, which gets us to our vendor glossary. In the work order capacity, the workroom itself, which will be performing the services, is stored in the vendor glossary, such as curtain calls workroom, which we'll be working with today, and obviously all of the suppliers of your materials that will comprise the finished room product as well will all be listed on your vendor glossary. In other words, just think of the workroom as another vendor. You're going to send them a work order. Eventually, they're going to send you bills, record the bills as vendor invoices, etc. Now, let's take a look at some of the information on the vendor window for one of our workrooms with regards to how it is going to relate to the work order itself. So again, let's focus on our curtain calls workroom. We'll go ahead and edit. That gets us to our vendor payee window, and we can see obviously the code, the name of the workroom, the vendor address that's going to show on the work order itself. The payee address will not. That is only necessary if the check that you may send from Design Manager has a different name and or address than the actual workroom itself. The account number that will show on the work order, not really too much to do with the work order itself, but if you're going to have the account number and you do use checks in Design Managers, I always suggest to use the include account number on check option, as you can see here. Let's jump over to the defaults tab and see what other information is available for us. Under the purchase order terms, that will appear on the work order itself, along with the purchase order shipped via. Very frequently, since they are so similar in concept and functionality, we will use the term purchase order and work order synonymously there. So just assume that it's the same order functionality there. Okay, The vendor deposit percentage, what the vendor or the workroom is going to be asking for us as a deposit, and out of that deposit percentage, which type of component types does it apply to? In this case, merchandise itself and installation and labor for the curtain calls workroom. Another handy feature on the vendor window is the ability to make a shipping location from an existing vendor by using the Create Ship To button here. Frequently, a workroom you utilize will require merchandise to be shipped directly to them. And this is a convenient way to create a shipping location quickly and accurately. So let's jump down to another one of our workrooms. How about Village Workroom? I'm going to edit. And if I use the Create Ship To function, Design Manager alerts me, hey, a Ship To code for this vendor has been created successfully, meaning that on our Ship To glossary, also accessed off our list in glossaries, Ship To codes, we now have a Ship To location created from our existing vendor. So all of our address information for Village Workroom is now created as a Ship To location as well. So rather than creating it yourself and perhaps inputting data incorrectly, etc., or just for time convenience, you can use that Create Ship To option right there. And that leads us to the concept of a Ship To when it relates to work orders. For work orders, the Ship To location is used to determine both where the finalized product is going to be delivered, along with indicated to the vendors for the constituent pieces of the fabrication where to ship their material. In other words, where the fabric's coming from, the frame, etc., whatever it may be, you're getting those from separate vendors. What workroom should they be sending all of their individual pieces to? Looking at our Village Workroom Ship To, you can see it's a very simple concept. It's really simply an address used to indicate where merchandise should be transported between locations, but it is necessary for the overall workroom functionality. Okay, vendors and Ship Tos, both critical aspects of the entire work order and purchase order process. So let's move on to actually creating work orders. The first step would be obviously to begin inputting the specifications for the goods we need to purchase and the fabrication itself. Since we're focusing on the orders themselves today, we're going to use existing specifications for the most part to keep ourselves on schedule and on track. If you have questions or want to learn more about entering in specifications, again, go to our YouTube channel, particularly focusing on some of our tutorials, and you can see short, quick, informative tutorials such as entering an item and getting all of the detailed information and you may want from those types of pre-recorded videos already. Okay, now the work order is, like I said, a document intended for the workroom to describe what service, refinish, etc., that's desired. It will also show all the necessary components required to finish the production, from what vendor they are arriving, all the workroom costs will be displayed, etc. So there's a lot of information on this single document. Let's go and review some of the specifications for a window treatment that we're going to be requesting one of our workrooms to create for us. So we can see how all that information is entered and how it relates to the work order document itself. So let's stay on our project tab and click our project specifications. And in this example, we have a window treatment for the Hilsons. And we can see it right as reference number 9 along the bottom. Let's go ahead and edit our window treatment, and we'll start on the item window itself. First, notice in our purchase order component grid, you can see we have quite a lot of various pieces that are going to comprise this window treatment for the master bedroom. So going back and reinforcing the concept of Design Manager, we have one item with a single price to the client that is comprised of all of these different pieces that all need to get ordered and fabricated, etc. Unlike the purchase order, for instance, the work order does derive some information from the item window, not just the component window, which is the sole focus of purchase orders. So I'll go through some of the information on the item window itself and how it pertains to the work order document. First and foremost, the item description itself. This is going to appear in the header of the work order, along with, as you probably know, the proposal and invoice. So be sure to input your description accordingly, as it will appear in both your client-facing documents and, in this case, the work order itself. Jumping over to the workroom tab, obviously that should have some of our information that we're looking for. We can see a few pieces of information here. First, the workroom vendor itself. The workroom, as we said, is simply a vendor who's going to be providing the desired service, in this case, Curtain Calls Workroom. Now take note of Curtain Calls, as we'll be seeing them again shortly. Next, ship finished product to. We talked about those shipping locations. So this is one of our shipping locations, and it's indicating where the product should be delivered upon completion. Should it come to our facility? Should it go to another workroom, a staging area? Should it go directly to the client, as the case we're using here? Workroom instructions. This is also going to appear in the header of the work order and really represents the overall fabrication instructions themselves. So anything you want to convey about the overall concept of the fabrication can be included in the workroom instructions. Also, on our picture, we are going to see an image of the work window treatment, in our case, right on the header of the work order as well. So that'll appear on that document too. Jumping back to our item tab, now let's start focusing on some of the components. And also at this point, it is important to remember, a component can be on both a purchase order and a work order, and they commonly are. So you don't need two components, for one to order from the vendor and one to be displayed to the workroom. The component can be on both of those documents, and again, that is usually the case. Let's take a look at some of this fabric from Kravet here as our example. Okay, so here, of course, we have the component description. That's going to be seen both on the purchase order and the work order. So that'll be viewed by both the purchasing vendor and the workroom. The vendor itself, who are we purchasing the fabric from? Kravet in this case. Our shipping location, or our ship to. We're seeing our Curtain Calls Workroom come up again. For work orders, the ship to is always the workroom from as is recorded on the item window, as we just saw. So again, notice that Curtain Calls Workroom is the ship to of the component, and it corresponds to the workroom vendor on the item window. Really, that's a critical point to remember, and it's necessary for the work order to process properly. What else do we have here? We have our manufacturer's catalog number, item number, SKU number, etc. When entered here, it's going to appear directly on the work order, so the workroom can actually cross-reference the proper materials for the project. The cost. Now, the cost on the work order will only show if the vendor of the component is the workroom. In other words, in our case, is Curtain Calls Workroom. And it'll do so for labor, for materials that the workroom may provide, etc. Otherwise, the component cost will not be displayed. So for our fabric from Kravet, it'll be included on the work order, but not the cost, just the information about the materials themselves. So in other words, any cost won't show for merchandise from any other vendor, only if the vendor is the workroom themselves. Great, an important concept there. Let's jump over to the Special Instructions tab. The purchase order side mark will also appear on the work order itself. Again, very handy for the workroom to cross-reference materials coming from other vendors. Workroom special instructions. There are two sets of special instructions. the purchase order special instructions on the top and the workroom special instructions on the bottom. They will only appear on those individual documents, so be sure you enter into the proper area depending on what you're doing. In the case of the workroom special instructions, this is the information to communicate to the workroom about the individual component, peculiarities of the repeat or sensitivity of the fabric, whatever it may be that you want to convey to the workroom. Put it right into the special instructions, and as we'll see, it'll appear right next to or right near the component itself. The image on our picture tab, here's our fabric. That will also optionally be displayed on the work order, again, providing the workroom some cross-referencing so they can make sure that the picture you have is what they have, the fabric they actually have in their hand as well. Great, so lots of information stored on a variety of different areas throughout our specifications and other areas like our vendor and ship to. So now we can go and start crafting our work orders. So let's get out of our specifications. We'll stay on our project tab, go under our documents frame, and go to project purchase orders and work orders. Let's select our Hilson project, and we'll get ready to go here. Now, looking at our purchase and work orders window, we do go into great detail on some of the columns and information listed here on our project management number 2 purchase order webinar. So if you want some more information about this window in its entirety, go review that webinar as I go into some really good detail there. Let's just focus on creating the work order itself. So to do so, we don't want to select add PO at this time. We want to be sure to select add work order. Now, one thing to remember, unlike purchase orders, work orders must be created individually. We can't simply select everything that I have a multitude of work orders for. Each work order must be generated and created individually. So you really want to focus on one fabrication at a time. On our new work order window, we're going to see all the components for this particular project, whereby the component has the ship to, that is the same as the workroom vendor on the item window. We keep saying to be sure to focus on our curtain calls workroom. The curtain calls workroom is the workroom vendor on the item window, and every component that has that as its ship to location is available to be created on a work order. On this window, I'm only seeing components that satisfy that condition and have not yet been included on a work order previously. If I wanted to see previously included components that are on prior work orders, we can always use the show all selection, and you can see we'll have a new column for already on purchase or work order. I like to focus on one fabrication at a time, so I'm certainly not going to do that and use that selection unless necessary. And now let's take a look at some of the information on this window itself, because there are subtle differences between the work order window and the purchase order window, and I'll try to point those out. We have our familiar tag column, which is going to indicate which components to include on the work order, the unique reference number for that project, the workroom. In this case, they're all going to be curtain calls, as we saw. The image, we can even see our thumbnails of certain fabric and hardware that we have listed for us. The description, the quantity and unit of measure. The estimated cost. Now, it shows on this window for your reference, but keep this concept in mind when we actually review the work order document itself, because I'm going to reinforce a concept that I brought up just a few moments ago. We have the component type, merchandise, installation, labor, etc., the location within the project, and now we have a different column for ordered vendor from. So we can see which vendor the component is being retrieved or purchased from. So in the case of curtain calls, we have all of the interlining, the labor, etc. And then from Cravat, I have fabric, hardware, etc. I have the catalog number of those pieces, and I can even conveniently see the last proposal number upon which the window treatment was included upon. Now, very similar to making purchase orders, all I need to do is tag or select the components that I wish to include upon the work order. And I can certainly take my time and just select or tag each one individually. When I do, two things happen. The green check mark becomes apparent in the tag column itself, and the line or the row for the particular component also becomes highlighted. So you can easily indicate which components you've selected already. If my window treatment had more than the 19 or 20 components that I have, let's say it has 50 or 60, selecting each one individually could be quite laborious, and I don't want to miss any. So just like the purchase order, we have an option for tagging. On the tag components for work order, I could select to tag all of them. And with one click of the button, I can easily select everyone. As we can see, if I made that an error, I can untag them all. And now I'm back to having everything unselected. And as you can see, we have a lot of other options in here. Certainly tagging all the components for a particular workroom could be convenient for a proposal if the treatment's the only item on a proposal. Or since we do need to create each work order individually, selecting by item can be quite convenient as well. So if I go down and take our window treatment item number 9 itself in that project and select that, I can also easily get every single component for a single item that I may need for our fabricated work order. Okay, once we've selected the components to be included, just like our purchase orders, we go ahead and click OK. And Design Manager is going to first show us our generated work order window. Remember, you're always going to have a single one listed on this window because you're doing one work order at a time. From here, we can review and change some information. So we see the unique work order number within our project. It's important to note that there's not a different numbering scheme between purchase orders and work orders. I already have a purchase order 1, as you can see on the side here. So my work order is going to be simply the next sequential number. They're still orders, either purchase or work orders, and they get numbered in the same scheme. I can enter in a reference number or some verbal information. Perhaps we'll do that. Today's date is the order date. The workroom where it's going to be shipped, as we saw before, ship via, ship by, and I can see my designer extension here as well. Like I said, this information can be edited or changed here as well, simply by clicking the edit button as indicated by the pencil icon. The ship via is pulling from our workroom vendor, as we saw earlier in the discussion. The designer extension, this is actually coming from my Hilson project. Let's quickly show that for those of you who don't know that handy trick. On our projects window on the Hilson Pocono, I'll select my Hilson Pocono project and click edit. On the defaults tab of my project window, I added Allison's information in the PO designer extension. Again, purchase order, work order are synonymous in this case. So this is going to appear directly on the purchase order on the work order document itself. So the workroom knows who at the firm to contact about the order. A very convenient feature if you're not familiar with that. And that does, of course, work for purchase orders, not just work orders as well. Ship on or before date. I can go ahead and input some information there. Let's say I need this by, I don't know, how about 2/28? Put that in. If I've already received a verbal confirmation from the workroom, if I spoke to them on the phone, or if they gave me some confirmation number via email, I could type that in, and I see that commonly for certain firms. But I often use the verbal area as a little bit of a description of the order itself. I could just put in bedroom treatment, and we'll see how that becomes handy momentarily. Click OK, and we can see all that information is now updated on our generated work order window as well. Click OK, and we can see our print preview of our work order document itself. And here it comes. And we'll go through each of the areas individually to see where that information has been pulling from. So we have our company information, as you're familiar with, and there is our contact information. So again, everyone at Curtain Calls knows who to contact at my firm about this particular work order. I have my verbal reference number that I've added in there for myself. Notice the difference where it says work order versus purchase order, which you may be more familiar with. I have Curtain Calls as the vendor, or the two in this case, who the work order is intended for. And going back, there is our final shipping location as we configured on the item window workroom tab. In our finished product workroom instructions area, this is our item description from our item window, along with the overall workroom instructions, again, which we saw on the workroom tab of that same window. We have our ship by date that we just entered. The ship via, like I said, defaults from the vendor, but we could have changed if desired. The account comes from our Curtain Call workroom vendor, as do the terms. And now let's look in the body of the work order itself. Oh, and of course, there's our image of our item as well, again, coming from the item window picture tab. Scroll through a little bit and we can start seeing those individual pieces or components included on the work order. Also notice that Design Manager is automatically only displaying sort of an abbreviated header for us, rather than showing the instructions and the images and the vendor address and shipping location multiple times. We're not showing that information so we can keep the document as concise as possible. First, let's review our fabric from Cravat. I can see the quantity and unit of measure. I see the fabric description. I see its reference number. Very conveniently, I can see the vendor and the contact information of that vendor, the catalog number. There's our side mark. And here are our component work order instructions as well, alerting us that there's a similar fabric and not to use that one. And we can see an image of it. What we do not see here is the cost of this fabric. Recall that I said the only costs we're going to see are those actually being incurred by Curtain Calls themselves. For example, the interlining. I'm purchasing them from Curtain Calls. So in that case, I do see the unit and extended costs. Similarly, the labor from the workroom. They're also going to be charging me, so I'll see that cost information as well. So this is acting as our de facto purchase order for the materials and services provided by the workroom themselves. Okay, and we can see all of our rest of our information. Anything that's not being provided by the vendor, by the workroom themselves, will show the vendor information, where it's coming from, who to contact, images, those types of things. And everything is listed for us, looking very professional. And then we're totaling all of the costs from Curtain Calls themselves and any deposit that may be required. Again, Curtain Calls had a 25% deposit required on the vendor window, and that's being calculated automatically for us. Once I've reviewed all of my information, I could certainly print out a copy. Right from my print preview window, I could easily email a copy, or I could export it where I would save it on my computer or my network, etc. If everything is to my satisfaction, remember, you always want to close the print preview and be sure to accept. If I reject it, just like a purchase order, the Design Manager would not consider it processed. I'd still have all my component information, but the order itself would not be processed into Design Manager. So I always want to accept, and upon doing so, I can see it listed on my purchase and work order window as such. Going back to that verbal information that I typed in, it appears very conveniently in the verbal ref number column. So if I'm not inputting actual confirmation information, that can allow me to easily see or remind myself what's included on a particular purchase order. It makes searching for various POs and work orders very simple. Okay, now I know I stated we wouldn't be discussing purchase orders in this presentation, but I do want to demonstrate that you can, of course, have both work orders and purchase orders for the same goods and services. We just made our work order for Curtain Call, so now let's make the purchase orders for the necessary fabric and other materials that are not being supplied by the workroom itself. So I can stay right on my purchase and work order window, and now we'll click Add PO as a demonstration. I can see all those materials that I was ordering from Kravit. I'm going to go ahead and select them all. I'll use my vendor tag option. Let Design Manager do the work for me because I didn't want to include anything from other vendors. I only want to focus on our particular window treatment. And now I can go ahead and click OK. So here I'm creating just a single purchase order for Kravit for all of the various materials that we're ordering. I can click OK. Here's our purchase order, everything that we needed. Oh, and notice here that our ship to location, obviously going to be curtain call. So all of that will be sent directly to the workroom, and I can go ahead and accept. So all the hardware, all the fabric necessary is included on both a purchase order and a work order, and is very common to do so. Great. Okay. Now, you can, of course, reprint an existing work order. Reprinting is making an exact copy of the order as it currently exists. This is different than editing a work order, which we'll discuss next. If you have not made any alterations that you want to have reflected on the work order, do not edit. You can inadvertently make unwanted changes by updating the cost information or removing or adding a component accidentally, etc. If you want to make a copy, just reprint. So to do so, you'd go back to your project purchase and work order. Let's jump to a different project this time. And let's see here, another work order for curtain calls. So if I want to just reprint it, view it, email it to myself, no problem. Just hit the reprint option on the purchase and work order window. I get my reprint work order selection, and I have some options here as well. First, I could email directly to myself. So upon doing so, Design Manager is going to bring up an email window with the work order as an attachment rather than printing it to the printer or the print preview window. Pictures, I can now optionally include the images associated with the components on the work order. It does make a very nice professional document, as we just saw, but it does make the document a little bit longer. And the option for show actual deposits and payments. This is very handy. It can be used to provide the workroom an accounting of the deposit and or vendor invoice payment sent for the order, while also giving a future balance due. So let's keep that selected, and we'll show an example of the reprinted work order. And here we go. Again, we're only reprinting an exact copy of the work order. We didn't selected not to show pictures, so there's going to be a lot less images and the document will be a little bit more concise. But at the end, because I used the show actual deposits and invoices selection, I can see any payments that I've already sent to the workroom. In this case, I've made 2, indicating that the order has been paid in full. So a very convenient way to communicate payment information back and forth with the vendor as well, or simply for internal storage or review, etc. Great. Now, unlike reprinting, you can edit a work order to reflect any changes necessary to convey to the workroom. Workroom or the vendor, quite honestly, any changes made in the specifications to the components on the work order will automatically be reflected during the edit order process. So let's hop back onto our newly crafted work order for the Hilsons project. There's our work order for curtain calls. And now, if I want to reflect any changes I've made or make other changes, I can use the edit button. I can simply click edit. I could double click the order as such. Either way gets us to the edit change order window. Notice it doesn't say new work order, it says edit change order. The first of many ways where it's going to indicate that we're making edits or changes to the order itself. And we can see that the window has subtly changed as well. First, we have both the date, which is going to be the original order date, and we have change order functionality being selected here. What this will do is going to indicate that the title, rather than saying work order, will now say change order. This is an option that can actually be set as a company-wide global setting. So if you want to use change order processing, make sure you can set it as this, the default of Pro Cloud. If you don't want to use it, you can go to your company information and settings window off of your File tab, select Advanced. Then on our company advanced options, we're going to jump over to the Purchase Order Work Order tab, and there's an option almost dead center of that window which says default to change order on edit. If I don't want that functionality to be used or to be the default function, I can simply uncheck it. And you can leave it checked or unchecked and make those options desirable on the window itself. So if you want to use change order processing, you can configure it on a company-wide level, but you can always individually do it on the order you're working on. So let's leave that selected just to show the differences here, and we can even change our revised date. Let's imagine this is a few days into the future. How about we say 2/22, and there we go. Again, we have the option to show our images or pictures, which is selected for us along the top right. As I just said, any changes that I already made to these components in the specifications would automatically be reflected here. But I can actually make changes through my edit change order window as well. So let's say that one of our labor costs had changed. Let's see, perfect. And it wasn't actually $450. Let's say it was, oh, I don't know, how about $550 per foot. Tab through, our extended cost goes up to $82.50, as we can see. And that's immediately reflected on our edit change order window as well. So now if we click OK, notice we are maintaining that exact same work order number. We're editing an existing one. We're not adding, so the number should change. Should not change as it's currently shown. And if we click OK, we'll have a few more subtle changes in the document itself. We can see, since I'm using change order processing, it says change order rather than work order. Very convenient to alert to the vendor that there has been an alteration of some degree to the order itself. And if we look for our labor, there it is. We went from $450 to $550, and there's our $82.50 of increased extended cost, which of course would be reflected in the overall total, and our deposit enclosed changes automatically as well. Again, if everything is to our liking, we're going to go ahead, close the print preview window, and accept. It's important to remember that alteration I made to the component isn't just on the order. That's throughout. It's an integrated platform. So back in our specifications, if we go to that Hilson project, let's get down to our window treatment item. If we scroll down to component 7, we can see that our change has been updated there as well. We can see the estimated cost is now $82.50 because we changed our unit cost as such. So we just edited the order and I made my change, quote unquote, on the fly. Very quick, very seamless, and it is, again, fully integrated throughout the platform. Lastly, we can delete an order as well, as we saw previously with purchase orders. Work orders function in the exact same manner. If I need to absolutely remove this order, I can do so quite easily. All I have to do is have it highlighted on our purchase and work orders window and go ahead and click the delete button. As in any case in Design Manager, when you're removing information, you're going to be alerted that you're doing so. So you can be sure that you want to agree to actually deleting it, or you can click no to prevent that from occurring. But if I want to go ahead and delete it, I definitely can. And once our order deletes, what we will see is the order itself has been deleted, but but of course the components themselves still exist. What do I mean by that? Well, back in our specifications, just by deleting the order is not going to delete all of those components. We're just saying, hey, I made this order in error. I want to do some changes or what have you. All we're deleting is the work order itself. Now, Design Manager is not going to allow you to do things that'll get yourself into a little bit of trouble. So we're going to have checks and balances that would prevent you from deleting a particular order if any accounting activity has been associated with it, for example. So let's take a look at a work order a little bit deeper in the process, back to our Carter's Pennington home project. And we can see that I've sent deposits on this and actual invoices as we saw during the reprint process. So if I attempt to delete this work order, Design Manager is going to go out and immediately can see that there has been activity associated with this particular work order, and is going to say, hey, we're not going to delete the order unless you get rid of all of the activity associated with it. Nice checks and balances so you don't inadvertently delete orders that you sent payment upon. Okay. And with that, that brings us to our end of our discussion on work orders today, where we really tried to review all aspects of creating, editing, and monitoring work order functionality in Design Manager to help out all of our new Design Manager users with the process. And hopefully I pointed out some additional features to our Pro Cloud veterans out there as well. I thank you all for joining the discussion today and hope you attend another of our free webinars in the near future. Take care and have a great day.